Rotoballers, we are back for another episode of the Rotoballer PGA Show with the hottest man on the planet right now, not just in looks, but also in golf bets, my main man at T of Sports on X, Spencer Aguiar. How are you, bud?
I'm doing well, Byron. I know last week when we aired this show on Twitter, the live feature of it did not work. So I think we have things going this time around. So that's good to see. Unfortunately, had an overlap with Joe Idoni there. But yeah, I mean, last tournament was great. We kind of talked about it a little bit on the show, and I talked about it throughout the space in general. I don't think every single time Scottie Scheffler or any of these players are sub 10-1, they are unbettable commodities. I understand that we want to look at these tournaments and we see all these long shot winners, but it's like we discussed. Bay Hill was one of those venues that accentuated all the strengths. You still have to get lucky and things still have to break the right way to actually hit the outright ticket, but it was a solid week on the head-to-head front, 3-0 on in-tournament bets. That looked like it was going to salvage the week otherwise from some of the pre-tournament matchups I had, but then when you have a Scottie Scheffler good across the finish line at 7-1, and I underbet it. I usually bet to win 7 or 8 units. I only bet it to win a little bit over 5, but when you can add a 5-unit mix into the deal there, and it ends up being almost a 7-unit week, it's always a positive.
That is amazing to hear, Spencer, because we are here to celebrate the Rotoballer PGA Show's hit now 3 winners this year. That's kind of pretty impressive if you ask me. The boys are cooking over here on the Rotoballer Show. I bet Scottie at the Genesis kind of didn't quite work out for me. I'm happy to have him get across the line for you. I had Wyndham Clark.
It's the same course and the same theory for why you would like Scottie at the Genesis. I do think the water that came into play at Bay Hill probably made him even a little bit more conducive to high-end success. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned that you had Wyndham Clark. Wyndham Clark is phenomenal. I mean, unfortunately, he didn't get across the finish line for you, but he has turned into a legitimate top 10 golfer in the world.
Yeah, he shows up, man. When it's a big time event, he's kind of like a Coloradan Brooks, a little bit more cringy Brooksy, where I think when the big boys come out to play, Wyndham Clark's one of the tough guys on the playground, and it's fun to watch him take a part at these big golf courses. I think he's really shown that these big fields do not tend to make him crawl up into a little ball and shrivel away like we've seen from other top-end talent on the PGA Tour this year. So it's good to see that someone's actually got some nuts to kind of hang around with Scottie, despite him winning now his last 2 tournaments, which was the Players and now last week, were both by 5 shots, Spencer, I believe. So when he wins, he wins.
I mean, I think when you don't have to look any further than the putter. When he wins, he probably won because the putter was neutral or better. And when the putter's neutral or better, he wins in going away fashion. And there were some really interesting returns last week, and we can talk about that a little bit when we discuss players for this week. But you had names like Siwoo Kim, who gained 9 strokes tee to green, and he lost 9 strokes putting. That was a venue for him that he seems to do that every single year. It'll be interesting to see when you put him on to a Players Championship TPC Sawgrass course where he's won in the past, if that ball striking return can come into play. But this is a very complicated venue. It's one of those tournaments where if you look at the course history, it's all over the map year to year. I do think that it's a little bit more simplistic in the breakdown of it. With this being moved from May to March, I think it changes some of the tangible expectation that we should be expecting here. But you don't have to look any further than these leaderboards to know, like, this is chaos personified into a golf tournament.
Chaos personified, Spence. I was going through the research show last night, and it took me 5 hours. It's the Players, though. But hey, we had a fun time on the show. I was going through the top of my model and just looking at Players course history. It took me forever, like an hour into the show, to find someone that had like reputable course history. It's so difficult to kind of find golfers that have repeated success around you. And even the guys that have had repeated success, it's either a variation of high-end finishes and missed cuts, or just mediocre performances somewhere sitting in like the 30s to top 10, like nothing exceptional over and over like we've seen Scottie at Bay Hill. That's a really unique part of this golf course. But before I ask you about that, Spence, Ian McNeil, our boy at Rotoballer as well, the flag hunting article and our course preview there says that Wyndham is still 66-1 at Valhalla at Bet365. I feel like that's a really solid play. It's a great comp course,
It is, and this is now a major championship winner where those prices are probably a little bit too heightened at this point. So I will agree with Ian.
Yeah, totally agree with Ian. Glad he never put anything Hideki related in the chat there. So Spence, chat to me about what you're kind of expecting from. Are you looking at course history, or are you looking at recent form more this week entering the Players Championship?
I actually ran course history, like a little bit less than I normally do, and I did try to put in some of the recent metrics from approach play and off the tee. I think this is one of those courses where it'll catch up to you fast, and implosion potential is always around the corner. You have 17 holes that are going to have water that come into play. So uh, when I looked at this venue, one of the things I noticed is kind of that move from May to March that I talked about. And I think if you try to build things off a little bit further than that, you're running into problems. Like, you don't want more than a 5-year duration of time that you're running these numbers for that reason. But the one difference is when this was played in May, you got this Bermuda surface. It was still dormant, but playable in from the winter months that it was. Created this fiery test. It made stopping your irons on these smaller than average greens pretty much impossible. You're still going to get some of that lightning quick surface that we've become accustomed to over to the years here. But I think more of where I'm going with this answer is that the Bermuda grass gets overseeded on all parts of the course now. That creates a much softer landing area that allows better shot shaping. You can control your irons better coming in. I talked about there being 17 holes with waters. There's 18 bunkers that are going to come into play. I think strokes gained around the green is still something that gets amplified because of that smaller surface that I keep mentioning. But I do want to note there's shaved runoffs here. I think that's why guys like Victor Hovland have been able to putt from off the surface. It's always a better return when we look at that from players like him. So just because you have a bad around the green game, some of these players that had better quality with their 3-putt avoidance got a boost in my model. Sam Burns would be one of those names. The around the green game is spiraling, but inside the top 15 on my model for expected 3-putt avoidance. So I think there's a lot of definitely a dangerous course, and you add all this together and you get 17 holes with water. One bad thing happens and all of a sudden you miss the cut. And that's where the course history or the lack of course history return really comes into play. But I don't know that this is as volatile as everybody believes it is, at least with the answer of what we have gotten in the last 5 years. It's been a little bit better than the erratic nature that we had before that. It's still erratic. You're still going to have Rory winning and then missing a bunch of cuts and then coming top 30 and then missing a bunch of cuts. But there's at least something now that I feel like we can point to. And a lot of that comes down to scrambling. How can you control your short irons? How's your total driving on similar comp courses? Like there's ways that we can build this to at least try to solidify some of the key statistics here.
Yeah. I went from last week having 15% weighted course history in my model to reducing that to 5 and trying to really build the ideal golfer more so this week, kind of like you just mentioned. I think that's really important this week. There are also particular golfers. I've kind of also leaned into this a bit and trying to find golfers that are very course history-ish, that have like a specific skill set, a specific kind of course history to their name. You know, certain golfers like Scottie will just play well anywhere. But like guys like Christian Bezuidenhout has had great success at this venue compared to like other courses he's played at, and other guys like Victor Hovland have played great here too. So we'll have to see. You know, I'll put that in my model, which we'll be putting in the PGA Stat Buffet going out later tonight, and kind of diving into all of that. By the way, so I do want to mention I'm wearing the Jet stuff because it is, you know, market moving day out there, and we let one of the best pass rushers ever, Bryce Huff, to go sign up with the Eagles. So congratulations to the Eagles on signing yet another star. But I got jersey number 30, which is actually my Lindeque jersey. I got it for my 30th birthday. It's the only jersey of 6 that now is on the team. The other 5 guys are no longer. One of them is Zach Wilson, though, but he's essentially as good as dead. So just thought I'd share my little – we do like to share our jersey situations here. It looks like you're just rocking a clean polo because, you know, you're just a baller and it's the players. So it makes tons of sense this week.
I decided to clean up this tournament. It's been a lot of basketball jerseys before this.
Yeah, I was curious if you're going to rock another one or not. So I went with the Jets jersey to see, because old Doug says, yeah, his favorite Jet that once wore 30, before my time, was who? Brad Baxter. So there's your little Jets trivia there for you on the Rotoballer PGA show. Random question for you before we get into the players, Spencer. Who's your favorite Jet of all time?
That's a good question. I liked Chad Pennington when I was young. I liked Keyshawn Johnson. I really like Garrett Wilson now.
Yeah, dude. Remember I chatted about Garrett Wilson and Elijah Moore? Talk about getting a horrible take wrong when I said Elijah Moore is going to be way more successful than Garrett. Garrett's now had back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. So I love Garrett too. I think he's going to be phenomenal. Thank you. I like that answer too.
I'll give one more answer now that I think maybe Curtis Martin. I really liked. To me, a lot of those '90s players is like the nostalgic feeling, whether that's NBA or football for me. So I'll go with Curtis Martin.
Okay, I like it. Mine has been Ryan Fitzpatrick. It was the closest we ever got to winning a playoff game or getting into a playoff game in my Jets fandom. We went 10-6 and still missed the playoffs 2015. So that was a brutal year for me. I actually remember crying in my uncle's basement. So I was an adult just crying in a basement because of the New York Jets. But anyway, let's talk about the Players' Championship and who's going to be making us cry this week when we over-rost them, overexpose ourselves in DFS. It's going to be a fun week. It's a volatile tournament. There are going to be guys that we like to play this week, Spence. Scottie Scheffler sitting at 12-8, which is fine. We're starting to see that 5K range make a repeated appearance in the DFS slate, which is exciting. We can chat about that a little bit, but let's chat about the three guys. Xander Schauffele, 11-3. I'm just going to go right off the top rope here and say Gourmet or Cray Cray. To me, 11-3 for Xander at a course like this, with just like hardly ever contending to win a golf tournament. Like the moment I start speaking about Xander, my camera gets blurry. I think that's just how like my fumes just like ooze out of me about frustration. So 11-3 to me is a cray price tag for him above the 9K range there. What's your thoughts on Xander being 11-3?
I'll give you a hot take, Byron. So, and I think this is good from a roster construction standpoint to even have this discussion. So when you have volatility at a course, I think you should shrink your player pool. I think that's a very important thing. You don't want pieces to everybody. You want a very solidified group of players that you're going to build around and go in that capacity. When this board open, you get Scottie at 12-8, makes a lot of sense from what we've seen. You get Rory at 11-6, you get Xander at 11-3, you get Thomas at 10-6. We'll just stop at those four. I'll go down one name there with Thomas. I kind of think that the 41 consecutive cuts that Xander's put together plays really well for a tournament like this when there's a lot of volatility into the mix. I want safety. For me, I thought Rory, I thought Thomas, but they were a little bit too volatile for me. Like, I'm probably going to just let them beat me. So I liked Xander. I liked Scottie up at the top. I'm probably going to ignore the rest of this $10,000 plus section. And those will be the two guys that I am the most exposed to. A lot of that answer does come down to Xander's consecutive made cut streak. If it's going to get broken, it's going to happen at a tournament like this. I understand that, but I think the safety plays well for him, and the statistical profile inside of my model really liked him. Inside of the top three for projected win equity, that's not necessarily an outlandish comment. I think if you look at a site like Data Golf, they have him second in projected win equity. We can make the argument that Xander doesn't win golf tournaments, and that's fine. But, you know, give me a top 10 or 20 here. I think it pays off better than most weeks of that answer.
I've got him second in my model, so there's that. But, you know, the maniac in me is like screaming at the model and saying, what are you doing? You know, obviously, I guess second is perfect for him, right? Like he's this elite golfer that just continually finishes not first. So I guess that's a great like spot for him in that range. I do think, you know, there's some really interesting names in this 10K range, Spencer, some guys that are not playing good golf entering this week. And I think out of all the people, like you really have to be in control of your golf ball. I think the weather's going to be rather placid this week. So I think there's a bit more predictability, at least. You know, golf balls aren't going to be flying off into the water like we've seen over the last few years, at least from what I've looked at. It, you know, it's a Monday. Golf starts on Thursday, and it's Florida. So we know the crazy stuff that goes down in Florida if you just watch the news there. But I think, you know, Scottie's a very interesting case at 12-8. I mean, that's spendy, Spencer. Yeah. That's a lot of money. And in a field like this, the type of golfers at the bottom are really, you know, not necessarily going to be oozing confidence when you kind of take a look at what they're up to. So at 12-8, that's going to be very difficult for roster construction, in my opinion. let's chat about some contest selection again, because I want to kind of mention I typically flit and flat between 3-entry, single entry contests for these like designated small field events where I really want to hone in my player pool. I do agree that keeping a tight roster this week is important, but I've gone to 150 max again. My usual 50-cent entries there. And this time I will update them also. I won't enter 149 of the same lineups that have Eric Cole in them and Steven Yeager for the Cognizant. But I'm curious because I feel like that gives you the opportunity to play a bit more Scottie, because you can potentially get a few 5K guys through and then you're kind of different already.
Well, I mean, that's my mentality to this. If I'm condensing this player pool in the way that I plan to, I agree with you. The $5,000 section leaves a lot to be desired. The highest ranked player for me, like if we're just talking about pure overall rank, would be Chesson Hadley, 54th overall. If you're looking for upside, it would be Sam Ryder at 39th. There are pieces and there are players you can go to here, but I don't necessarily believe it's that difficult of a roster construction to fit Scottie in when I get rid of everybody else that's not named Xander up there. And like for me, I probably want 6 guys from the $9,000 and up section. And those are going to be the 6 guys that are just in every single build in some capacity of the way I'm doing it. So I understand the narrative of the Players' Championship and defending champions not ever going back to back. I understand the narrative of them not even playing well. I don't think Scottie is the prototypical champion. The ball striking is so elite that if he beats me, like in the sense of me playing him and he beats me because he misses the cut, I can live with that. I think there's a massive difference between him and a name like Rory. I know people want to continue to play this Rory narrative, but my model had so many concerning trends when it came to Rory. Like one of the things I noticed here, and we can talk about it very quickly. Yeah. There was this corollary trend inside of my model that I've picked up on the last couple times of running it, that when you are good from 150 yards and in with your proximity and you're scrambling and you add those two pieces together, that usually dictates high-end success inside of my model. So
just for the players?
For the players, for this particular tournament. Last year, Scottie's number one. He wins the event. In 2021, Justin Thomas is number one in that. He wins the event. You look at Rory for this particular tournament, 109th in my model in expected proximity from 0 to 150 yards. When you look specifically at the scrambling number, he's outside of the top 50 there. I think there are massive concerns to be had with his game with the way that it sets up right now. I'm curious to see where the ownership lands with him because people are going to want to play Justin Thomas. And I have similar concerns with Justin Thomas. The numbers looked great there for a second, and now we've kind of gone on the opposite route, and it's hit and miss for him every single week. He puts together some great performances. He puts together some real stinkers here and there, but the players has historically for him, and I think this is for the last 3 years of me running my model, Justin Thomas was the projected number one player in my model for 3 consecutive events. This is not the same output I got for him this time around. You can say that maybe that's a lot still to do with the current form of last year that I had. I might still have a little bit too much 2023 inside of my model. I wouldn't expect your overall rank for him to be as low as mine, but I had him 28th overall. I had negative trajectory for upside. There are some better safety numbers that come into play because of that Players' Championship pedigree that he has, but he's going to be very popular. So that's kind of one of the reasons why I'm fine letting him beat me. And I think people got some decent outright numbers on him when they shopped around early. I wouldn't have gotten there myself. I understand why people did though, but he's just going to be a pass for me. Like I would rather play, and these are not even guys I'm necessarily on this week. Like I'd rather bet Victor Hovland against him in a matchup. That's something that's minus 110 both ways. If you notice in the market right now, he's an underdog to almost everybody. And I think that's like legitimate reason behind that.
Yeah. He was, dude, I mean, on hole 11, he hit the ball in the water off the tee 3 times. He hit in the fairway in round 1, and then after he went through a full sleeve of golf balls just on hole 11 last week, taking irons and woods off the tee. Like to me, that's just such a head-scratching moment where Wyndham Clark hit it straight at the water, but it stopped 10 yards short. To me, that's great course management. He hit a terrible shot, but because of his decision off the tee, he was fine. JT, I mean, he's trying to pinch off 20 extra yards. Like, how's that really going to help you when you just keep milking it into the water there? So very peculiar play there, especially with bones on the bag. I was quite shocked at what was going on. Granted, JT is the guy driving the vehicle, and he did drive it into the water 3 times, but it's just really interesting. And when I bet him to finish inside the top 5 after round 3, in the wind, I love Justin Thomas in the wind. He played great, started off nicely. And then he was like 150 yards out and would make bogey. Like 158 in, bogey. It just like head scratcher decisions. I don't think his game's in as much control as we think.
I agree with you on that. And if you look at the 2022 version of him that came to this tournament, that's one of the best performances I've seen somebody put together on the wrong end of the draw there. I think it was that year at least. And then even still, the pieces crumbled around him. And he has questionable course management at times. And I agree with you. I don't think the game is quite as crisp as everybody believes it to be. And I will sit here right now, Byron, and I will tell you, I am running things for too long of a duration with him because he gets hurt more than anybody else. I'm not sitting here making the argument that he's the 28th best golfer in this field. But if you're going to have that volatility inside of my model at a volatile course where some of these proximity numbers up until recently were not exactly where you would want them to be, I'm fine letting him beat me.
Absolutely. I think that's the thing, and I think pivoting off the right guys this week at the top in this kind of a slate is going to be critical because this is where chalk goes to die. Like you're going to see people load up on certain golfers and then just be disappointed because it's just 1 or 2 water balls. And then all of a sudden you're just sitting with, 25% ownership, not making the cut. So interesting stuff. Spence, I've got Victor Hovland ranked 53rd in my model. And I know that sounds bizarre, and it's just the model that kicked it out. Like from a safety long-term perspective, he's 17th, which is still rather disappointing. But like right now for his upside, it's 50. Like he's just not bringing it, man. Like I'm kind of just curious as to your take on Victor because I think he poses a very important pivot in this range where if you take a look at how he's played around here, great stuff. But, like we've also seen him play good at Bay Hill, and he wasn't quite doing it last week.
What hurt him so much for you? Is it the recent form? Is it around the green?
It was a little bit of around the green play. It's the fact that his poor shot avoidance is kind of lacking from the wedge range there. I think he's like sporadic in that department. He's just around the green play overall. I feel like that's kind of important this week. Like you said, the putting can help, but it's just the recent form. His bogey avoidance the last while has been abysmal. He's just not in control of his golf ball. And I think I've been including a bit more recent birdie rates in my ratings, and it's not looking good for Vic. I think he's been struggling in that department and not making nearly as much birdies as we've seen him in the past either. So I also weight a lot of approach play. He's 59th in this calendar year.
That's the problem inside of my model also is if you compare his approach play from just this season over my long-term baseline for him, I mean, he's worse in almost every single category. He's 100th in proximity within 100 yards. When you run this from a 2-year duration, he's 120th this year. He's 50th in my baseline projection from 100 to 125. He's 57th. From 125 to 150, my baseline has him at 36. He's 97th this year. And then you get this terrible return from him from 150 to 175, where my model had him as a top 20 player as his baseline. Now all of a sudden he's outside of the top 100. So, I mean, I'm not playing him for DFS. Like I do stand by my assessment that I would rather roster him than a Justin Thomas. I would rather bet him in a head-to-head matchup than Justin Thomas. But like for
what
me,
ownership would you play Victor Hovland at?
I mean, what do you think he's going to come in at?
I'll be shocked if it's with those around him playing pretty solid. I would think he's sub 10%. Is that a little too aggressive?
He's playable. I think he's playable. Like, right. I don't want to give a number that I have right now. Like I have him at 10%. It's too early. These numbers are going to shift. That's not necessarily where I project him to go, but I think as a sub 10% option, he's a name that you can consider. If we're trying to, I mean, what do you have here? You have 6 players, $10,000 and up. You're going to have to make a decision in every one of these spots of, do I want to play this player and do I want to go overweight, or do I want to remove this player from my player pool, at least with the way that I'm playing this? Like, you're either in for me and you're all in, or you're all out.
Yeah.
I think Hovland at sub 10%, you could sell me to put him into the player pool. I have him 10th overall. So I'm a lot higher on him than you are.
Yeah.
That's kind of where the difference comes into play. I still think he's overpriced, but at a low enough ownership percentage, there's leverage to be had for a golfer that has success out here.
Yeah. It's, to me, I'm just kind of thinking from a Sungjae Im perspective, who's $8,400 this week, who entered Bay Hill playing atrocious golf. We were saying he was broken. I was not going to touch him with a 10-foot pole. I wouldn't touch him with your 10-foot pole, Spencer, entering the week. Turns out Sungjae had a great week last week. He kind of just found his groove at a course that he's comfortable at, right? So golfers that have got a good baseline that can, go back to a course that kind of reminisces some good vibes, some good performances, maybe they just bounce back there. But like Bob Baby Daddy in the chat there said, Victor's around the green play since he left the coach. He's now tired of asking the same questions to that guy. He wants to ask someone else. And if he's going to play worse golf going there, so be it, I guess. So interesting stuff.
This show has turned much more sexual. Like, Baby Daddy's in the chat. You're talking about my 10-foot pole on this show. There's a lot going on right now. I guess the one counter argument that I would give to Victor is it's the same answer that I gave for Sam Burns. The 3-putt avoidance is something that I do think can mitigate some of his around the green concerns.
Yeah.
If you want to say that the iron play isn't where you want it to be, and that's a reason why you're out on him, I think that's a very solid reason to take him out of the player pool. But I'm not going to worry as much about the around the green game. I think he can salvage it a little bit.
Yeah. Baby Daddy's saying you better start speaking about Jason Day just off the cuff. Hey, he's in the 8K range. We'll get to him here shortly. But let's talk about some guys in the 9s real quick, Spence. I think I'm going back to Wyndham Clark. I have an outright on him. I think he's entering the week playing some of the best golf outside of Scottie Scheffler, in my opinion. Last year, he gained about 4.5 strokes off the tee at this golf course. He's very erratic off the tee with the driver at big golf courses, but I think when he dials it in with the 3-wood, with the 3 irons, he can really, really do what like Minwoo Lee did last year kind of thing, just kind of piece his way around this venue. He's incredibly good from 150 to 200, which I'm really weighing in on this week. Great form, putting much better entering the week too. So I love Wyndham Clark. And then I'll also just mention, I might even just start a few lineups with Wyndham Clark and Max Homa this week. I think I've always said Max Homa's superpower is his putter. What did we see last week? He finished 3rd in putting at the API, finished 8th overall, on the leaderboard there. And I think Max has finished 6th and 13th at this golf course, the last 2 starts. There's a lot of boxes that he's like quietly checking, and he's playing with Baby Daddy. There was a person that commented on his wife's Instagram or something about the fact that Max has sucked at golf ever since having a kid. And he went to Twitter kind of airing his grievances there. So I think he's playing with Baby Daycare kind of revenge tour card there. I'm in on Max Homa at 33-1 and Wyndham Clark at 35. So are you on Max?
I bet Max at 33-1. So I talked about this earlier in the show of Scheffler ranking first in that category when I combine that. Thomas in 2021. This week it would be Max Homa who's number 1 in that category. So I think there's a lot trending in the right direction for him. When I looked at this $9,000 range, there's probably a few players that I am lower on than market consensus. I'm not in on Colin Morikawa this week. Market seemed to like him a little bit. He's a favorite in a lot of the matchups I was looking at. My model didn't necessarily agree, so I'm out on him. Probably going to give the same answer for Shane Lowry. Like, he has respect in the market, but I don't think we're a Shane Lowry show at the end of the day. We never seem to play him. Maybe that's for my own detriment of what we've seen recently. And he's been great out here, but I really like Sam Burns. He's probably my favorite play on the board. I think Ludwig Åberg, I saw Ian talking about him a little bit. I liked Åberg this week. It feels like a nice bounce back spot for him. I'm going to play Jordan Spieth. I'm curious to see where Jordan Spieth's ownership comes into play. Very volatile move. I'm expecting it to be low ownership though, from what we've seen recently. The scrambling numbers are always going to look great. Some of the total driving numbers, though, what was most intriguing to me. So he was a player that at almost any course that you look at, he's going to be volatile off the tee, and there's going to be that downside that comes into play. he jumped inside the top 25 of my model when I ran it on similar courses that had a bunch of water that came into play. So I think Spieth is intriguing for a low ownership play. Some of those 40-1s when they entered in the market, thought it was just marginally too high for him. Min on Homa, like I talked about. And then, it'll probably be those 4 with a consideration. If I'm going to add somebody else, it would either be moving up to Victor if the ownership's right. I mean, you could maybe sell me on Zalatoris, but like we have to make decisions and players have to get removed from the player pool is the problem. So I think for me, it probably would come down to Scheffler, Xander up top, Homa, Spieth, Oberg, Burns in the 9K range.
Okay. I'll answer Ian's question on Oberg. It's been interesting. Ian, I did a deep dive on him last night. And if you take a look at what he got up to in 2023, if you look off the tee, he came out of college and he's like floor round off the tee for per round strokes gained was like 0.8. And in 2024, it's basically just been like his ceiling round has been like 0.8, 0.9. He hasn't been popping off the tee like he hasn't shown us that elite driving that he showed up with. It's his license has been revoked. He's driving in the slow lane now, and it's like relative to his skill level, right? And that's his like ultimate superpower there is his ability to just be long and accurate off the tee. And it really hasn't been as sensational as we've expected in 2024. He has been playing, and that's the thing, is he's moved from the RSM Classic, the John Deere Classic, all of the classics, to now invitationals and the Players Championship and big boy events. Yes, he played nicely at Pebble. That was only 3 rounds of golf, and he was short gaming out of his arsehole there. But I think if you're in the mood for him, it's an interesting situation because it is one of those shorter courses where I think we all kind of pigeonholed him into these big major-esque, like Ian said, major-esque championship type courses, and he's just not thriving on them as much as we expected. And I think, maybe this is a chance for him to do that. The putter has been amazing for him, but it's like, I don't know about him, man. He hasn't lived up to the hype, and not a lot of people are speaking about him after they were calling him, the second coming of ball striking paradise there. So
I don't know if you've seen a similar answer when it comes to the metrics. I'd be curious to see exactly where you have him. Have you noticed how bad his par 5 scoring's been?
No, because I don't really have that much up, but even last year it wasn't very good either, right? So
no, I mean it's just been like I don't know. Like when I ran this from a 2-year perspective, and maybe this is just too much of recent stuff. He's 6th in my model in par 5 birdie or better percentage. He's 111th this year.
Wow.
And we're talking about a few tournaments, only a couple starts, and things can go wrong. And maybe he's number 1 in my model this week for expected total driving. And maybe that's where these shorter courses actually benefit his game. But the iron play has some question marks behind it. The par 5 scoring, which you're going to have to score on these par 5s for sure. I think from a leverage play, I'm intrigued because I don't think he's going to garner a ton of ownership. That part of it's great. Yeah. I think from an answer of safety, there are red flags that are popping up left and right.
I did a deep dive into par 5 scoring because I wanted to kind of see what the hell Cameron Young's deal is. Like someone with elite length like he does and a massive iron play from 200 plus. What on earth is his deal on par 5s? Why wasn't he scoring?
He's another one.
Another around the green, like one of the biggest correlators to par 5 success is around the green because you're not going to be hitting all those greens from so far out. You have to be able to chip and putt nicely on those holes in order to kind of secure a birdie, like a pretty guaranteed 6-footer. And I think Cameron Young, Ludwig Aubert, both struggling around the green this year. They typically, I don't know how Ludwig's done in the past, but that kind of could be another reason why he does. Yeah, he's 90th last year in around the green play,
Well, I can give you some of these answers. I just ran it very quickly. Like these are the biggest decliners in par 5 scoring from last year to this year. So number 1, Oberg. Number 2, Vincent Norman. Number 3, Nikolai Højgaard, which, that explains this Højgaard problem. Like I thought he was a top 20 player in the world and he can't seem to make a cut in any tournament that he's playing. Justin Rose has taken a massive decline in that area. Cameron Young is one of the biggest movers there. Mm-hmm. Rory McIlroy has had a very similar problem. So it's kind of the same answers over and over again. And specifically of like Oberg, Rory, Cameron Young, these are guys with their length that you would expect to dominate. the par fives, and they are not.
They're just not. And dude, golfers, I say this all the time. Golfers are psychos. I played golf today. The same shit that I always do happens. I've shot a 45 on the front nine and 38 on the back. It's what I do. That's why my show is called Back Nine Bets. It's not called Front Nine Bets. I'm terrible on the front nine. I'm amazing on the back. But there's certain holes that golfers are just not good at. And it's like a mental block that they sometimes have about kind of just not functioning on a par five, for instance. If you made them all par fours, they were long ass par fours, maybe they'd play better just because it's not a par five, right? Like, I think the pressure of making birdie maybe gets in their head. Who the heck knows? Darbo in the house in the chat as well. Let's speak about some 8K golfers, Spencer. I'll just jump right into Sahith Theegala. Let you speak about your boy Jay Day. I have Sahith at 55-1. He is driving the golf ball relatively to his like baseline. I think he's starting to really find his groove in that department. He can get exceptionally hot any given week. We've seen him, gain 4 strokes around the green at Bay Hill. We saw him finish 4th in total driving last week. So there's a lot to like about him. His putting is amazing. He can fit. A lot of people say Jordan Spieth, I call him the Mediterranean Spieth essentially. I think he's also very Cam Smith-esque, where you can just kind of drive it terribly, but he's not even doing that anymore, and just scramble your way to scoring. And putting and chipping at this golf course, Cam Smith did it, right? We gained 10 strokes putting and won. So it's doable. It's not easy to do, but if there's someone that I could see gaining 10 strokes short game, it's Sahith Theegala. And when he's feeling his irons, he's a very good long iron player, and he can score on those par fives, obviously, right? So now that he's driving the ball better, I really, really like his chances this week. $8,700 is a very fair price for me. I know he struggled last year a little bit, but we'll kind of just take a chance on him there. I'm going to lock him into about 33 to 50% of my lineups, depending on where the ownership comes in on Sahith this week.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. My favorite player in the $8,000 range is probably Russell Henley at 8,600. He has all those answers that I was talking about of a player that from 0 to 150 in the scrambling that just skyrockets up my model. He's 4th in my model there. I have him as the best player in this range, like regardless of what the price is. I think he in a head-to-head matchup should be favored over all of these guys. I think Siwoo Kim is interesting just when you look at the ball striking that he's put together. You now get him onto a course, I am hoping, where he gained 1.2 shots or whatever it was in his year of winning it. Like, if he can do something like that with those ball striking totals, he can work up a top 10 or 20. And I kind of would make an argument here, whether it's right or wrong, that a name like Brian Harman at 7,900, I know I'm dipping a little bit lower. I'd probably rather play Harman than any single person that's not named Henley there. So I bet Harman at 70-1 when this open. I think there's so much to like about the profile. And I came on, I don't know if it was this show last week. He was my biggest fade that I had at the Arnold Palmer. Couldn't find a matchup against him, thankfully. The only thing I saw out there was against Justin Rose, which I wanted no part of Justin Rose last week. So I kind of lucked out by not having that matchup. But if Harman at the API could put together that performance when my model thought he was the most mispriced option, I always talk about how long I run things. So it's not like his 12th place finish and the over 5 strokes that he gained with his approach play is going to massively climb him in my model. If now all of a sudden you put him at a tournament like the Players, where he's had 2 top 10 finishes over the last 4 years, all the scrambling totals look great, everything's kind of trending in the right direction for him. I think this game is in the right spot for a major championship winner, to where he should have been in the $8,000 plus range. I think he's too cheap at the end of the day. I think he's one of the better bets on the board, and I'm fine having a massive amount of exposure to him because I just think it's a mispricing.
Spencer, I haven't kind of run the numbers exactly to validate this like assumption, but just looking at all the guys I looked at last night, the guys that had the most consistent course history at this venue, Brian Harman being one of them, I think he's only lost strokes off the tee at TPC Sawgrass in like 3 of the last 21 times he's played here. So he's had immense success in consistency at this venue. And I think what you can look for is guys that have driven the ball well here. It doesn't have to be with distance. Obviously, the biggest issue is finding the penalty areas off the tee or putting yourself in positions to find the penalty areas on approach, right? So finding the right spots off the tee is domino number one, because if you're like, that domino meme where the smallest domino falls and all of a sudden like this massive epiphany, massive wall of a domino kind of at the end falls down. If you're not driving it well, that can essentially kind of knock great course history or great recent form into the week out of the ballpark there. So Siwoo Kim, what does he do very well? He's like just rinse and repeat, not rinse, repeat off the tee, right? So Siwoo, amazing stuff there. Sungjae Im, also like very enticing play, in $8,400 there for me. I think he's going to really look to find his way into my lineups this week if he's not too owned. Another name I will say is Minwoo Lee. I know. I hate the guy. I hate the hype, but here I am making photoshops of him on Walter White in like a Starbucks apron running out of a camper. But I think he's got this affinity to play well at these Florida courses. It's something about them. And I know that the Bay Hill form was terrible. I kind of faded him in DFS at $6,600. A much better pivot was Grayson Murray, Mackenzie Hughes kind of guys. I think Grayson Murray in particular. But this week, with the form that he showed you last year, he can chip and putt his way around you. He can strike those 3 irons off the tee boxes. And Spencer, I have never seen something like this from a golfer. We are sitting in a situation with wedges where his strokes gained in this field is 116th from 100 to 150, but his good shot rate is 3rd. I don't know if there's a bigger discrepancy in strokes gained versus like upside random shot making than him. And it's not like it's just taking one good shot. It's taking half a shot. If you gain 0.9, if you gain 0.51, it's still like just counting one, right? That's the rate. So it's not like he's had some exceptionally good shots. He's just had a lot of good shots. And to me, around this golf course, he's going to score for you doing that. He's much more higher priced now at $8,000 in a bigger field. I think he's not going to be nearly as owned, especially after a bad week last week. The hype's a little bit gone, but maybe people will go back to him after a good performance year last year and some kind of Cognizant Classic comp correlatory situations there. Do you think there's a good kind of method to my madness in kind of going to him there again, or am I getting caught up in the hype?
I mean, I don't want to victory lap what he did last week. He still made the cut. He didn't really get the performance that you wanted out of him. I said it on this show, and I said it over and over again last week. I thought he was not an option that was underpriced, like at least massively underpriced like the rest of the community did. I didn't have him all that. Like there's an upside to him maybe for the reasons that you just talked about. But I also didn't think that the price was that far off. I had him like $700 being more of the accurate total if you put him at $7,300. I would make an argument that for this particular tournament, Byron, at $8,000, I'm not necessarily going to get to him. I think that this is a better price than and more accurate, and you have more upside here for all the reasons that you just talked about than what we got last week. There's a lot in his profile, a lot more than last week, and a lot less of the downside, which I think the biggest corollary that you would try to find here when you're getting the data and you're pulling the data here, like last week, there were 4 categories that I ran that he was outside of the top 100 for. This week, there's not quite as many of those answers. It doesn't mean that he's popping in my model in every single way that I ran it, but there are options where the weighted proximity likes him more this week. All the weighted scoring numbers are going to love him just because of his birdie or better percentage and how he scores on these par 5s. He is a very erratic golfer. He can make a lot of mistakes, and I think that's like why it makes sense to where he hits a lot of good shots where he creates birdie opportunities, and he hits a lot of really poor shots to where he could find the water. So it's a boom or bust profile for him. And I think at $8,000, like at this point, at this course, if you want to take a chance, and maybe this is more than anything, a better outright bet. And I know you have the outright ticket on him. Like that's more of where I would want to bet him or get exposure. But I think he's okay this week. I'm not 100% out on Minwoo like I was last week.
And if he's running, like if he's not a good pivot, I don't know if I'll go to him in DFS. I've got the outright. I'll call it a day there. I think, the upside's obviously there. We've seen him win twice in the last little while. We'll see what happens. I don't want to leave the 8K range without mentioning Benny On. I think he's due for a win. The guy came back scorching up the leaderboard. I think he had the 4th best round in round 4 on Sunday. And he's $8,100. He's a very good chipper of the golf ball. I think he's a great wedge player as well, which is where you're going to do a lot of your scoring. He dominates the par 5s. He's a very good, like long iron player player. And I think looking at his situation, he's trending, Spencer. Like the guy just keeps finding himself at the top of the leaderboard on golf courses of varying layouts, of varying kind of structures. You know, we've seen him play well at Sony. We've seen him play well at Bay Hill now. You know, those are two very different kind of golf courses. I think he kind of suits these more positional tracks actually very well, you know, because those wedges can really unleash him. So do you have anything to say about Benny On, or do we want to jump into the sevens?
Not really. I'm fine with anybody who wants to play him, though. I think he's one of the better options to consider in the $8,000 range. I'm curious to see where ownership lands. He was a big mover in my model for safety. He was inside the top 25 of every single way that I ran it. I think he's a safe and fine play this week. Cool. As safe as you can get for this tournament, at least.
Yeah, exactly. For this tournament. Let's chat about Tom Hoge. Did you land up jumping on the Tom Hoge train at all?
I didn't bet him. I mean, he's going to be 75% owned on DraftKings. Like, yes, everybody's going to want to play him. There's a lot to like about his profile. The one negative thing that I at least want to mention, and this is usually an output in my model that I hate to see, and when it's this big of like a difference of a player, where when you have an overall rank that is grading high for me, like in a good way, and then you have this negative leverage for upside that comes into play, as massive as it was for Hoge, and he really diminished for upside in a lot of the ways that I ran it, that took him off the map for an outright ticket. So that's the reason why I didn't get to him. I'd rather go to Harman, who had a better upside profile when I was comparing like apples to oranges there. Like I just think Harman wins this event more frequently than Hoge wins it. And I don't think that that's even that outlandish of a comment to say. Like, I think the public would more so rather bet Hoge, but Harman's a major championship winner at the end of the day. So
what were you seeing Hoge at when you were trying to bet him? I mean, I know your numbers come a little later than us, you know, over here in Iowa, and I know your books, you know, you don't necessarily get them as quick.
I mean, I would want him at,
because I got him at 100-1.
I think 100 is probably the number. That's what I was going to say. Is if I was going to jump in, I think 100 is probably a fair number. Higher than that would be better, but I think once you get lower than 100, it's a lot of hype train. It's a lot of movement that's occurred at that point. I think you've missed the train of actual value. Like 100's the exact cutoff line for me to begin with.
Cool. And also kind of just getting back to the Sex Panther situation. Yeah, I know this is a really random topic, but I called Russell Henley the Sex Panther on my stream last night because 60% of the time he's inside the top 20 all the time. And that's just an Anchorman reference for you there. He's exceptional at just grading out for top 20s, yeah. And I'll be going back to him again in that market. I think he's been playing great golf. And Spencer, his whole profile has morphed. He's turning into like a short game specialist right now. His ball striking has been rather like substandard by his you know, kind of history. He's sitting 68th in ball striking, but 11th in short game. Like, to me, that is like scary, but he's been doing it the whole year. I don't know what's happened. So at some point, does the ball striking return with the short game that he's been showing, or does the short game disappear sooner than the ball striking return?
I always bet things for the ball striking to end up like coming back to where you would want and return to the baseline numbers there. And he's one of the biggest climbers in my model that I had in expected putting on this particular green complex. And if that can continue, and there's so much to like about the ball striking profile in general, and with the scrambling included in that, I don't know. He can win this tournament. And that's why I think he's one of the better plays on the board. Yeah.
I mean, Russell Henley trying to win tournaments is what nightmares are made of, but he does get it done every now and then, right? It turns into a bit of a fairy Disney tale situation there. But,
well, let me run through these numbers. I think it's actually very curious from just a putting answer here. So baseline number, strokes gained putting, this is all courses, 86th overall. You put them on similar green complexes, and this would be any surface that's going to, this is any surface. This is not just Bermuda, and this isn't even a true Bermuda at the end of the day, but any surface that is soft, and I believe it's going to be soft because of the move to March here, but still remains quick or lightning or whatever you want to put the terminology to. He jumps inside the top 5 of my model in expected putting. So I know people were making jokes last week that the coverage was saying that Russell Henley is this great putter. Well, okay, he's not a great putter, but You put him on this type of a surface, I would make an argument that he is a good putter here. So if the putter can remain hot and you have some of these ball striking numbers, like he's 9th in my model in expected proximity from 0 to 150 yards. I keep going back to that answer of these players that can scramble. So if you have the scrambling nature to him, you have the short irons that come into play, and you have a putter that increases on these similar green complexes. I think he's one of, like, legitimately, and I know this sounds crazy to say, Byron, I legitimately think he's one of the favorites to win this. Like, we don't need to get carried away and say he's one of the top 10 favorites, but I think he's one of the top 15 favorites. And if you look at specific sites, like I think Data Golf had him 3rd or 4th, which might be getting a slightly carried away with it, but there's to me, there's legitimate win equity on this golfer on this golf course. I didn't get there for an outright ticket, but I'm going to be massively overweight for DFS. And I do think a top 20 sort of a bet is a very nice way to play him if you do worry about some of that upside.
Absolutely. I think for a top 20 right now, he's plus 190. Plus 190 for a guy that's inside the top 20 60% of the time. Sex Panther, like that's the situation over here. So I think plus 190 is a go.
That's a good number
for me. It's amazing, especially on a course fit, a course that fits his game. So we've got Baby Daddy asking again here about chalk and how you kind of approach chalk, and if you kind of just fade it all or don't. I'll go ahead and just give a few quick takes on this. It's also very course dependent. It's kind of field dependent. Certain venues make fading chalk a lot more viable, like where there's a lot more water, chalk fading is better. I think, the volatility kind of ramps itself up where you go to like golf courses like Augusta, where, great course history and repeatedness, where the chalk is going to accumulate. You got to kind of lean into those because those guys will play well again. I think you have to play some chalk. You can't necessarily fade every single chalky golfer because the DFS markets have got so sharp that we're kind of finding all these golfers that are underpriced. We're finding all the golfers that are playing good golf and everyone's leaning into them. There are obvious pivots to get off of them. But, there's going to be a few guys that are chalky that are going to be inside the top 10 at the end of the week. And you're going to just have to try and figure out which ones those are and kind of hit your wagon and really get overweight on them. Typically you want to do 2x the field. So I don't know how much you can add to that, Spence, but that's kind of my philosophy on all of that.
Contest dependent. I think that's probably one of the ultimate deciders on that too. If I'm going to play chalk, I try to get massively overweight to it. Like I make a real stand that if this player is going to make my player pool, I try to get probably even larger in a lot of spots than 2x. Like I try to get exponentially over the field and kind of take my stands in those spots. If I'm seeing something, I think it just comes down to, as you said, though, the course. I think the profile of the golfer, like I think like for this particular tournament, a name like Will Zalatoris, while he's going to be popular, I'm probably going to fade the chalk in this spot because there's some negative trajectory in my model when I'm looking at certain portions of how I'm running this, where if you look at a name like, I think Sam Burns is going to be popular. I think Sam Burns, though, is going to be good chalk for this just with the way that I ran my numbers and some of these things. So I'll find a way to get overweight on Sam Burns. I'll find a way to get overweight on Russell Henley if he becomes popular. I'm not going to get off of those profiles, but it also comes down to what does my model think is his overall rank? What does it think is his upside rank? Where's the safety number? Because when you start having the overall rank at a certain, like, let's just say the overall is 15th, the upside is 29th, and the safety is 6th, that's a cash game play for me at the end of the day. Like, I'm not looking to play those guys in large field GPPs with a bunch of ownership around them. When you flip that profile and all of a sudden you can find some upside into the mix, I think that they're more conducive. Like Henley and Burns both jump for me for the upside numbers that were run inside my model. So I think they're much savvier plays to be played for large field contests, but it kind of trickles back to what I initially said. It's also contest dependent. There are players in single entries that will make more sense to just eat the chalk in it, where if I'm playing, 150 man GPP large field contests, like I don't necessarily want that Will Zalatoris sort of a profile, even if my model likes him.
Yeah, I agree. And I think one more thing on that is just to make sure that there are at least 1 or 2 guys that are like 5 to 2% in your lineups, or sub 10% at least. I think that kind of, depending on the field size, will change. I think in where there's 11,000, 110,000 entries, you're going to need a 2% guy in there to kind of have a shot, and hopefully that guy kind of pulls through. It's going to be tricky to find him. He's a 2%er for a reason, but if you find an edge in that department, that's the way to go. So
I also think in single entry, you don't need to get as different as people believe you do. Yes. Everybody tries to like recreate the wheel with it, where in a single entry, if you can find one player that's under the radar, that's sub 5%, you're already different with that. So I think people look at this and they're like, well, I can't play all the chalky names. Well, yes, I agree in a lot of contests, but there's certain fields where you can still go that route.
Exactly. Cool. That was some fun little chat about DFS there. Let's dive into the sevens where there are chalk bombs abound. You know, we've got guys like Chris Kirk. Adam Scott's played quite nicely at this venue in the past. Adam Scott entering with some great course history. There's a lot to be desired with the mid irons there from 150 to 200, which is a major concern for me. He missed the cut at Bay Hill. Like, what's going on? You know, we'll have to see as that form left him. I was taking a look, Spencer, and Christian Bezuidenhout's only driving the golf ball on average 279 yards. I couldn't believe I was seeing that. I don't know if it was just at least this year that he's hitting it that far. I don't know if it's just a certain drive or what, but regardless, I was looking at other guys and there's like 300-yard averages in the field. Like, to me, it just doesn't make sense why you wouldn't want to hit driver harder or further. You know, like, get on the stack system and just start pumping drivers out there. I don't know what's going on with him. He does have great course history, yeah. And this was the week that his irons like kind of shone last year. We started seeing some good iron play from him at the Players. I'm kind of curious as to what your take is on Bezzy this week and other 7K guys.
I like him this week. And when pricing opened, and unfortunately numbers move fast, Bezuidenhout had a matchup against Ricky Fowler where I think he was plus 100 is what it opened at. And that number has ballooned out now to a point where it's moved 30 plus points. But yeah, that's kind of where I wanted to get my exposure to Bezuidenhout. Top 35 player for me. I think I'm curious to see where the ownership lands, but I liked him. For me, I'm going to throw Tom Hoagie away from the conversation here just because he's going to be so popular. Yeah, that's a discussion that we can have later in the week with roster construction, exactly how we want to make these builds. But I like Brian Harman, like I talked about. I really liked Adam Hadwin's upside in my model. I think he's the one name that I might try to get aggressive with in this range alongside Harman. And I also like JT Poston. He was very similar to the Brian Harman answer last week. One of the biggest fade candidates for me that I had on the board. Didn't necessarily provide the Brian Harman finish. He closed very poorly. I had Jake Knapp in a matchup against him, and Knapp found the water about 100 times there.
Oh, God.
That was not a pretty sight, but I'm willing to ignore what Poston provided there. Now, maybe there is a problem to be had with some of the approach and off the tee numbers and that was the reason why I didn't like him last week. We'll see where the ownership lands. We'll see where some of these numbers form, but I think for me, the two favorite plays would be Harman and Hadwin.
Interesting. Those are some names I didn't quite have Harman I like, obviously. Sorry, I wasn't quite paying attention to the last sentence there, but I do not know what I'm doing with Hadwin. He's just, he's such a wild card to me. You know, like I think at the Waste Management, he was very popular, had a complete dud. You know, it's just interesting stuff. These are like golfers, they're humans. It's just a whole crazy situation. But if you do like a guy, get all in on him. Someone that I'm kind of really curious to see what he can get up to is Steven Jaeger. He's driving the ball right now so well. And it's kind of crazy to see. I think he's just nonstop with the driver at a golf course like this. I think he can kind of be aggressive with his driver and really start gaining strokes like most people can't at this venue. And then his just greening regulation from a weighted perspective is impeccable for me. It's 7th in this field over the last 12 months. So he's going to be hitting a lot of greens. He avoids a lot of poor shots, largely probably due to the driver being that good because, you know, he's finding himself in manageable areas to come in at these flags from. $7,200. He kind of messed it up a bit last week. I had a top 20 on him, but he really avoids bad shots well at this golf course. And I think Jaeger at 7,200 is a really nice play for me. I'm kind of in the mood to kind of maybe go back to him for like a top 40 this week. I think that's going to be where I'm going for his bet.
I mean, no argument for me there. He has an increase in weighted proximity. He has an increase in expected total driving for this course.
Yeah, it's exciting, man. And I think he's lost a bit of his glimmer because he's had a few bad rounds here and there, but I think he can expect a bounce back this week. Kind of like we're going to expect not even a bounce back. Doug Gim is just playing just ridiculous golf right now, Spence. And Doug Ghim for a top 20 is plus 320. And if you take a look at what Doug Ghim has been up to in the last 4 starts, I think he's finished top 20 as well. And I think it's just been a run of incredible form from Doug. And at this golf course, he plays top 20 golf. His top 10, top 5 upside is non-existent. He just doesn't do it. But when it comes to finishing inside the top 20, he's doing it at a 35% clip. And he really likes this golf course. It's like it just suits his eye. And I think it's probably got to do with the fact that he's an accurate driver of the golf ball this week. And I think, that's appealing to me. I think he's going to be popular.
He's going to be extremely popular.
Yeah. So plus 320 for a top 20 and call it a day. I feel like that's a good way to kind of just get your exposure there.
I think that's fair.
Mathieu Pavon, $6,700, Spencer. What's going on there? That's my cray price of the week. And it's a good cray. Like that to me screams value. This guy's he's gained the 6th most total strokes in this field. And it's been in big boy events, like he's been playing good golf. I know last week was a bit of a letdown. In all reality, the Farmers win was a complete long shot. Like I don't expect him to ever really play as good as he did there again. I don't think that course suits him that well. These kind of courses, like we saw at the Cognizant, he had 1 or 2 bad water balls here and there, but at $6,700, I'm assuming he's going to be really popular, maybe, but he's right by Doug Ghim, which is, thank God, a nice situation. But I've got an outright on the guy at 150 to 1. So, like, what are we doing with Mathieu Pavon at $6,700?
Let me ask you this, Byron. You would think I would have learned by this. I've been doing podcasts for a couple of years now, and not every single podcast is live. This one happens to be one of the ones that's live. And I ran into this problem last week that I mentioned some plays that I didn't actually have action on at the moment. And the numbers skyrocketed in the other direction. So you would think I would have learned not to do this on a show, but
do it, Spencer.
What are your thoughts? And I'm assuming you're going to like it based off of your answer. And I haven't decided yet if I'm actually going to go down this path, but Pavon plus 100 over Sepp Straka.
Ooh, interesting. Let me take a quick peek on Sepp because Sepp had a disaster. He tied with Jake Knapp last week. I think Pavon is just a way more consistently reliable source. I think Sepp Straka can have a good week here and there. Maybe their upside is the same, but their floor ain't. Sepp Straka's Austrian floor is missing multiple tiles, where Pavon is like bedazzled in the Grout's gold lining. It's just looking good for me.
That's essentially what my profile of both of them when I ran the model said also. Like the volatile nature of Straka at this course, I don't understand, or my model didn't understand, I should say, why he was the favorite when he opened. And this number's dropped a little bit. Like you could have gotten Pavon at a plus number at a certain point, and we're down at plus 100 now. But I think it's an interesting price there. I don't know if it's going to end up being one of the plays that I give out for Rotoballer, and I'm assuming now that I've given it on this show, this number is going to move 30 points and we're going to be gone with it.
Hey,
but
you know what? We give the people a little bit of love here. We really appreciate all of you for being in the chat and hitting that like button, subscribing to the Rotoballer PGA channel there. That's what you're going to get from us. Yeah. And if you've lasted an hour, congratulations. You're getting a nice little play from Spencer there that he typically puts in his Vegas report that you can use code TOFF to get 10% off there. Let's dive into a few other names, Spence. Let's chat about Billy Horschel. I think he's a very peculiar character to me. Very nice performance at the Cognizant Classic. I think had he known he had a chance to really win, I think he might have played even better down the stretch, but he got hot. And to me, Billy Horschel kind of suits this golf course to a tee when you kind of think about his accuracy off the tee with not as much distance typically, and you can just get really hot with the short game. So Billy, to me, I bet him at 200 to 1. I know I've bet a few. I've got 10 guys on my card. I don't know what I did this week, but they all made sense. At 200 to 1, Billy Horschel was an ideal play to me. So kind of curious as to any other names you have in the 6Ks. Yeah.
Let's see if there's anybody.
Andrew Putnam, Lucas Glover.
I like Nick Taylor. I did like Pavon and Ghim. I'd like to see where the ownership comes in on those two. I think Brendan Todd is interesting.
Yes. He's been playing some steady golf. I think him and Paul Tesori, maybe that partnership is starting to kind of gain some momentum. I don't mind him at all.
Yeah, I think he's too cheap Like he shouldn't be a $6,500 golfer in this field. If you're looking just for like pure value, the two best values are Gim and Pavon, and that's why all the ownership is trending in that direction. The third best value for me is Todd, and I don't see the same ownership projection. So like it's a pivot away from those two, but I also think it's a nice play at the end of the day, even without it being a pivot.
Yeah, I agree. I've got him ranked 23rd for safety in this model, $6,500, right? So that's kind of crazy. Andrew Novak's another guy that jumps for me. I know Ian's a big fan in the chat here of Aaron Rai. This kind of a golf course kind of screams Rai situation. He's a very, very good golfer out of the rough, and he's also just a very good golfer from 150 to 200 when avoiding bad shots. He's third in the field in poor shot avoidance from 150 to 200, which is about a third of the shots this week. And Aaron Rai is extremely accurate. He's very good out the rough. I don't think playing out the rough is that big of a deal this week, Spencer. What have you made out of, like, last week was important to play well out the rough. This week, I feel like the issue is if you've missed the fairway, you like in like pine needles and kind of lies that you don't typically see on most golf courses.
Yeah, I would agree with you 100% there. And just to touch on the Rye topic, like there's been a lot of sharp movement with him in the space. I think he's a favorite against every single person I've seen. He might even be a favorite against Siwoo Kim out there. So like there's legitimate golfers that are priced much higher than him that sportsbooks out there believe he should be in a different range. I think because of that answer and because people have gotten more savvy, it's going to be tough because he's going to be popular. It's just how popular is he actually going to be? Because as soon as somebody sees, and I can give you exactly what the matchup is. He's minus 150 against Justin Rose. He is minus 120 against Doug Gim, which is everybody's favorite person this week. So that should tell an answer. I guess he's plus 105 against Siwoo Kim. But I think when like you're a favorite against Doug Gim and now you've all of a sudden taken an $8,000 golfer and you're only plus 105, everybody's going to see that, and that's where the savvy nature of the DFS gamer is going to look at that and want to play him. Yeah. I think he's the right play. I just worry about the ownership.
Yeah, this is the range, because if you catch the right guy in the 6Ks and start fading the wrong ones, you're going to have yourself some issues. And I think who asked us a question here about entries for something. Let me take a quick look here. We've had some interesting questions about player pool for 150 max. When I kind of take a look here, I'll pull it up, Spence. But what's your player pool for 150 max contests?
It's usually 20 to 30 players. I think specifically for this week, I'm going to be at the bottom end. I'm trying to condense this as far as I can. What that exactly ends up looking like, we'll see, but it's going to be on the low end of the equation, whatever it is. Like, I don't want a massive player pool this week whatsoever.
Okay. Does it change, like, say, for instance, not that either of us will or won't, but like if you lock in, say, for instance, Scottie Scheffler, and you lock him in, and then at, say, 80 to 100% of your lineups, does that make your player pool bigger? Because now you kind of have only 5 more combinations of other golfers you're trying to do, and potentially at his price, you can squeeze in. You're just looking for, you're still going to have a good chance of your guys hitting, but you're just kind of throwing in a few more long shots in that 5K, 6K range to kind of potentially take advantage of going overly heavy on a better golfer.
I think we've talked about this on the show before. I mean, that's generally one of my strategies is get very aggressive at the top and get like the massive ownership around the names that I want, and then go lower down on the board and take my shots here and there. I don't want to overdo it with too many shots just because I do think this is such a volatile tournament. And you look at the ownership around a lot of these players that I like down there. Unfortunately, like you have a Doug Gim that's going to be, I mean, what is Doug Gim going to come in at? It's going to be
10, 15%.
I think he's going to come in 15% plus. I think it's going to be wild.
Yeah, it's going to be crazy. And I think even if at his price, a top 20 will cash, a decent lineup here and there. But I think, just kind of betting him is the way to go for me. I'm completely in agreement there.
Let me ask you this then, because I think this is a good discussion point. And we'll remove Gim, we'll remove Pavon, we'll remove Nick Taylor. Like these are more popular options in the $6,000 range, and you're gonna have to pick and choose your spots there. You can't play every one of those names that I just said. I don't think it would be a counterintuitive move. Where would the leverage be for you then, based off of that answer? Like, where are you trying to pivot?
I would probably pivot to Billy Horschel. I don't know how popular Andrew Novak's going to be, but he's been playing some good golf. And
I think
Lucas
he
Glover
might be popular, but
yeah,
we'll see.
I think Lucas Glover potentially can kind of just ball strike this golf course to death. He's one of these guys that his poor shot avoidance is third in the field weighted wise. You know, I think he avoids the water really well. The putter can go out of control every now and then, but since moving to the broomstick, I don't think we've seen as bad. Like, it's been bad, but it's just been consistently poor. It hasn't been like exorbitantly pathetic, you know, if that's a kind of way to kind of look at it. And I think at the $6,300 price tag, when you get the fourth best approach player in the field at a mid-iron intensive golf course, I think you want to play him, right? His strokes gained weighted is fifth in the field for Lucas Glover. To me, that's an option I want to go to. Another guy is Andrew Putnam, who's kind of been playing some good golf on complementary kind of courses. I think he's played quite nicely at Bay Hill as well, which isn't a good golf course for him. So there's options, you know, and I think you just got to dig into them. Austin Eckroat, you know, 2 weeks after winning, maybe.
I'd like to see where Eckroat's ownership comes in. I don't hate Eckroat. I think for me, my favorite pivots, I mean, it's gross. Bo Hostler. The course history is going to look terrible, but this is a name that is a better golfer than this range that he's in. We've seen a real turnaround from him here in 2024. So I think Hostler's intriguing. I talked about Brendan Todd already. Maybe a Maverick McNeely. McNeely has shown a little bit of something recently. The numbers are trending in the right direction for him inside of my model. My math liked Ben Griffin. Like we're starting to get a little fringe of like who's going to make a cut and who's not, but that's what you would expect down in this range.
Yeah, it's going to be gross. And that's the thing, you know, you don't want to go, if you have the nuts to go at it and kind of roster someone heavily down here that's low owned in these big contests, that's the way to go. If you kind of don't, then you got to figure out how to build a lineup where you can get different and not necessarily involve yourself in these kind of guys. The 5K range, Spencer, this is going to be fun. Are there any names in this range that kind of catch your attention?
It gets gross fast. I mean, that's
fast. Chad Ramey?
Probably not going to play Ramey. Like, for me, I think Hubbard has some intrigue. I worry about his upside. I think Chesson Hadley has some intrigue. I worry about his upside. I guess you're trying to find cut makers down here, which those two maybe possess a little bit more of than some of these other names. Sam Ryder has at least a boomer bust profile that I mentioned at the beginning of the show. If he hits, my model thinks he's a top 40 golfer. When he misses, it's much, much worse than that, to where this is much more of a miscut. But I mean, not really. I think past those three names that I said, I'm probably mostly out on everybody. Like you could convince me on
Steve Stricker.
My number's like Steve Stricker.
He's $5,200 and he's good. You know, he plays on the Champions Tour still. Like at a course like this, his age isn't going to be an issue. It could be a benefit. You know, like I don't know.
I think he's fine for the price. I don't know what his upside is either, but when we're talking about actual price tag here and what my model thought, he was so much above everybody else in this range and below. Like he was in his own separate section. Like my model thought, and we're talking minor differences here. It thought it should have been like $600 more expensive, but it does make a difference.
Yeah. I mean, he's almost $200. He's $200 cheap, more expensive than the cheapest golfer in the field. And those are some bad golfers, right?
Well, that's the thing is everybody almost for the most part becomes unplayable at a certain point. There's one player 5,200 or less that's not named Steve Stricker that's inside of the top 100 of my model. That would be Dylan Wu, who's 88th overall. So, I mean, that kind of explains how poor this range gets.
Yeah, it is. It's glum down. Yeah, it's very, very glum. Joanne's been asking about T Moore. Let's chat about Taylor Moore. I don't even know what his price tag is. I'm going to have to search for him. 5,900. What are your thoughts on him at that price?
I faded him last week in matchups. Like I had Grayson Murray against him on Sunday at plus 130. I thought the ball striking numbers were really poor for him for what he was actually producing on the leaderboard. And we kind of saw that come into play on Sunday to where the wheels fell off for him finally. I'm not going to play him. He's not going to be in my player pool. I understand when you just look at like name recognition. I mean, you have the greatest golfer of all time, Webb Simpson, at the same price. You have Taylor Moore. There's really all that's in this like $5,000 range that would even make you think that there's upside and win equity of a golfer that's one. I mean, I guess Adam Schenk, but my model doesn't necessarily love Adam Schenk. So
yeah, I think that's probably bringing in a bit more like long-term form for Schenk. He's not necessarily been
massive. And even still, my model has him outside the top 80.
Yeah. CT Pan at $5,600. If you take a look at what he's been up to, man, it's been impressive. Like he was kind of hanging around Bay Hill for a while even, and he's been finding himself in these big boy events based off the recent form. He's had some really good results, Spencer. $5,600 CT Pan.
Who would you rather play, CT Pan or Chan Kim?
CT Pan at this kind of a golf course. I like Chan Kim on like a bit more open, birdie intensive venues than this.
I think that's a fair answer. I'll take Chan Kim just because I think his upside is larger if he actually pops. And I like some of his weighted proximity numbers that I saw from the ranges that I was looking at this week. But I mean, Pan has been phenomenal the last couple of weeks.
Yeah. And you know what? A WD looms. It's inevitable. And it's probably going to be when a bunch of people are on him. But until then, we'll take a chance on CT until the WD shows up. It's a game of acronyms for him, and it's going to be a battle of the CTs versus the WDs there until we kind of see otherwise. Spencer, any other outright bet or favorite bet that you kind of haven't mentioned yet that you kind of want to let the people know about? How many outrights did you bet this week?
I bet 4. I took Sam Burns at 40-1. I took Max Homa at 33-1. I took Brian Harmon at 70-1. And then my number grab in the situation, just my model was a little bit higher than consensus, was Jordan Spieth at 40-1. Spieth has a volatile profile where there's a lot that can go wrong. I understand that, but I thought at 40-1 there was intrigue. And I am curious to see where he comes in ownership wise on DraftKings. I don't think people are going to necessarily want to play him in that $9,000 section. I think there might be leverage that's able to be created. I never play Jordan Spieth. Like I never bet him. Anytime that I've ever been with a golfer in contention against him, it has gone so wrong. Like the one that sticks, there's 2 that stick out in my mind that are 2 of the worst losses I've ever taken. I had Dustin Johnson at Chambers Bay at the US Open against Spieth, and that was a disaster.
That was self-inflicted though from DJ.
Yeah, that was brutal. I stopped watching. I was actually, I left. I went to a boxing fight that day, and I was checking my phone, and I thought Dustin was going to win, and I had the tickets already. And then as I was watching the updates, I'm like, thank God I didn't actually stay home to watch this, because this has been just a disaster. Then all of a sudden he storms at the very end. He has the eagle putt to win from however many feet that was. It wasn't that many. Then he misses
15,
the birdie putt to bring it into extra time there. But that was the first one. The second one for me. Oh, by the way, I was watching that in Target, and I'm not kidding you. When that happened, I'm trying to get it on the television at Target, and I couldn't get the TVs on, and I'm updating my phone over and over again. And you know, sometimes when like these updates come into play, it's because something has happened. And I thought it's because Dustin, like it was taking 10 minutes to make this update.
Thought you won.
I thought Dustin won, and the update didn't end up coming in because the victory had happened. And I'm like, he must have made the putt. And then all of a sudden I looked, and I'm like confused of what's going on, because I see the tournament's over, but Dustin's name's not at the top. It wasn't even a possibility in my mind that Dustin could have missed both of those 2 putts and 3 putt from there. So that was the first one. The second one was when Spieth took out Kuchar at the Open Championship. Whatever year that was. I want to say 2017, maybe?
It was a while ago. Yeah.
Or maybe further than that even. That was another very painful loss. I always seem to be on the wrong side of Spieth in these situations. I never actually... What, sorry?
Yeah, you were heavy on Kuchar that year?
Oh, I had one of the biggest outright tickets I've ever had that year on Kuchar. Oh, it was terrible. I had him at 100+1 or whatever the number ever was on it. I'll have to go back check and figure out what it was. But it was one of the worst losses I'd taken.
And those are all on those kind of like linksy venues. Brutal stuff, dude.
Yeah, the go get that. I mean, that's the most painful thing of all time.
Dude. And that's the thing. That was prime Spieth, dude. That was prime Spieth. I don't know if we're ever going to see that again from him. Ian, talk you out of Cantley and Xander. The only two golfers in this field that will have to win twice in order to recoup their outright investment on them. Now that Scottie's won, are your two dumbasses over there, Xander and Cantley. So don't bet them outright until they do something and show you they can win a tournament again. You're just going to keep adding money to the pit of misery, dilly, Bud Light despair there. So
I have lost so much money on those two. It's unbelievable. I'm not going to talk Ian out of it because I was also intrigued. I didn't go down that route. So maybe that showed maturity on my end, but it just, I don't know. It hasn't worked out once.
No, it's been, I've been in on both of them, and not a lot of roller coaster rides, but the ones I've been on, I've thrown up all over myself, and it's hard to get those popsicles out of your Jets paraphernalia. I've got a few outrights I want to just throw off here at the end of the show. Thank you all guys for showing up. That was, we've got, I don't know what the hell these viewership numbers are. I think Twitter's on crack, but we've got 1,400 views right now. It doesn't make any sense to me, but we really appreciate everyone being in here. I got 10 bets. Max Homer at 33. Clark Wyndham at 35. Sahith Theegala 55-1. Minwoo Lee 60. Brian Harmon 75. Benny On 95. Tom Hoagie 100. Mathieu Pavon 150. Billy Horschel 200. And Nick Taylor 220. So I've got all of these random dudes. We'll have to see. I didn't really feel like super confident with my card entering last week. I had two guys in the top 5 and it was, it worked out. So kind of been figuring out guys and going from there. But Spence, tell the people what's going on at Rotoballer. Get us out of this venue.
Yeah, we have tons of great stuff at Rotoballer right now. You can find everything that Byron produces. Use the code MANIAC for that. I will be covering this tournament as always from every single perspective that you can find. We'll talk one and done. It was a good one and done week last week. I was able to use Scheffler there.
Yeah.
So that was great. We'll talk about it from an outright betting perspective. We'll have more DraftKings content. I have my model over there. Byron has his model. There is so much work to be found. Joe will have his core 4. Joe Idoni's going to put up everything he has. Ian has his article that he posted earlier.
Yeah.
It's a really great team we have, Byron. I think like this season, we were talking about it last week after the show ended. We are producing something at Rotoballer that I know both of us are very proud of. It's a community feel, everybody that makes us a part of their weekly research process. Like you come in, you chat to us. Yeah. That means more to us than anything. We hope you would consider checking out the content that we actually produce beyond just the podcast. But thank you to everybody out there who does listen to the show or read the content.
Absolutely. And we've got free stuff. If you like that stuff, consider using us for premium side of things. You can get a weekly thing. If you go to the annual stuff and you don't like it, send our bosses an email and tell them the product's crap. I doubt you will. You'll get your money back if you do. But, we believe in what we're doing over here, and we really appreciate all of you showing up and kind of sharing in this wonderful journey we are on in the golf betting landscape. I did want to mention one other thing that we now have a new admin for our Discord as of today. That's going to be upgrading and improving the whole Discord experience. And I know Discords are a big thing going on in the industry. So we really want to make sure that that's a nice, happy environment for not even just the PGA. It's going to be for all the different sports. So if you're a big DFS person, jump in to Rotoballer. We've got everything. We've got NFL, MLB, NASCAR. We've got e-gaming. We've got every single situation you could wish for. And it's like a really affordable situation over here for us at rotoballer.com. So we really appreciate all of you showing up. We'll be back again next week for the Rotoballer PGA show at 9:30 Eastern. My name is Byron Lindeque. Spencer Aguiar, 2 wins on the year. Let's make it a 4th for the team. Have a great week at the Players.